ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षातात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In this Tuesday Self-Enquiry session from Ramanacentre for Learning Bangalore, we commenced the session by meditating on Bhagavan's Upadesham. We've been reading his Upadesham from the book Years in the Presence of Ramana, My Master, which is written by Mahakrishna Swami. It is basically the reminiscences of Mahakrishna Swami during his stay in Ramanashramam and later when he moved to Brazil and started the Ramanacentre there. This was being originally edited by our founder, President Sri A.R. Natarajanji. And this week we are going to start with the chapter 2 of this book. After reading and meditating on this week's Upadesham from Bhagavan, by his abundant grace, we will have a 20 minutes self-enquiry session. Following that, our President Sarada Akka would be contemplating on self-enquiry as it has been captured in Ramana Gita, which is again a question and answers, questions put to Bhagavan by various devotees of Ganapati and others to Bhagavan on the self-enquiry, and Bhagavan's answers to them, which has been brought out in the form of a Gita, which is called Ramana Gita, and Akka would be talking about it. Finally, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In the chapter 2, the title of the chapter is Happiness, the Natural State of Being. So, Mahakrishna Swami is very beautifully saying, happiness is the natural state of being, is in the natural state of being, and that is the most important thing. One is the being, and that being our natural state, and that being equal to happiness. We'll continue to read his presentation. In the presence of Bhagavan Sri Ramana, all people felt happy, in peace, and invariably desired that this state remain indefinitely. The presence of the Master, his gaze, his smile, his words, his silence radiated something unknown to people. The Upadesha Sharanam, the force of the Supreme Self. The contact with Sri Ramana, no matter how quickly it was, left its mark, incentivating in the person the search for perfect happiness. Sri R. Natarajanji highlights this part of the thing. I repeat again, the contact with Sri Ramana, no matter how quickly it was, left its mark, incentivating in the person the search for perfect happiness. Here, in the last session, we were reading on how Bhagavan would give his teachings. In here, it is being expressed how people felt when they reached Bhagavan, whether there was a teaching or whether there was no teaching. But the experience of all, invariably, he says, was happiness and peace. Something which make them desire and remain in that state. Often in this world, when we wake up all the way till we slide into sleep, the mind keeps us busy jumping from one object to another object. And therefore, though it is in the search of happiness, invariably we find that everything is momentary. Whichever happy we pursue outside is all momentary. It is not something that you can continuously experience, a state of happiness or a state of peace. But when they reached Bhagavan, that was the beauty. There was no objective seeking there. It was just being in the presence of the Mahatma. That was enough for them to experience an unbroken happiness, an unbroken peace, which made them to desire for it indefinitely. Actually, that is the whole purpose, says Bhagavan, that we are searching for in the life. A happiness, unalloyed happiness, happiness which will not become diminished for whatsoever reason from any external circumstances. That has been our pursuit, says Bhagavan. And he continues to say in Who Am I, Bhagavan, that is the real nature of ourself. And it is like that musk beer, where the scent is coming from the self, from the deer itself, but it feels that it is coming outside somewhere and keeps running here and there looking for the source of the scent. It is like that, says Bhagavan, though that we are the source of happiness, our true nature is that of happiness, that pure state of being, but we continue to look for it outward. So Bhagavan here says, the presence continues to say, Mahakrishna Swami continues to say, the presence of the Master, his gaze, his smile, his word, his silence radiated something unknown to people. Something was spectacular because Bhagavan did not see anything anything called duality. It was that unity that Bhagavan transmitted in that silence. And therefore, that was something amazing for the mind, which is always looking for some dual experience or something outside for it to relish. It was something unique. The Mahakrishna Swami says it is the force of that Supreme Self. It is the force of that unity that was continuously being transmitted by Bhagavan, he says. Then he goes on to say, the contact with Sri Ramana, no matter how quickly it was, left its mark, incentivating in the person the search for perfect happiness. And Nachu Swami very beautifully says, in fact, Bhagavan sings about the magnet and the iron filings. No matter when we look at the iron filings, when it comes in contact with the magnet, we feel that it is the iron filings which are putting the efforts or moving towards the magnet. But in reality, it is the force of the magnet which is pulling the iron filings towards them. And no matter how much of a contact these iron filings make with the magnet, they will start exhibiting the same qualities of the magnet. A few minutes back when they were far away, it was like an independent iron filing. But moment it comes in contact with the magnet, it starts to exhibit in some varied degrees the qualities of the magnet. And it here, because we are conscious beings, the people who experience the power of the self or the force of the self, which is peace and happiness, he says that it gave an incentive for them to look for it again and again. That was the thing that people experienced having come to Bhagavan, says Mahakrishna Swami. The next paragraph, he continues to say, happiness was always a constant theme in the dialogues that Bhagavan Sri Ramana with the visitors. All the variants of what is called happiness were commented on by him, explained, reaching the conclusion that true happiness is our very essence, our natural state of being. Questioner, what is happiness? We do not find it in daily life. So when do we really feel it? Bhagavan says, Ramana says, when one accomplishes something agreeable or when there is absence of disagreeable facts, we say that happiness exists. But such happiness is relative and it is better to call it pleasure. But men want a permanent happiness. This is not in objects, but in the absolute. It is a natural state where man is free from pain, from pleasure, and in peace. So this is what Bhagavan talks, and we looked at it, that we all look for that unalloyed happiness, that happiness which is continuous, unbroken. But when we find something agreeable to our mind or something which is unagreeable to our mind is avoided, we do find that we are happy. Oh my God, that big thing which was supposed to happen got avoided. We become happy. Or that big thing that we were expecting came through. We become happy. But that is only personal, because that cannot be what could be happy to me may not make somebody else happy. But when we look at Bhagavan, when he was established in the absolute self, we saw that whoever came to that Sannidhi experienced that happiness, that natural state of happiness which Bhagavan says. So therefore, that is the real happiness that Bhagavan tapped into, and he is also asking us to reach out to. So that in that very presence, in that state of being, that if we all can establish ourselves, which is so natural to us, wherever we go, whatever we will be doing, it is only the happiness that will be shared and experienced by everybody. And that will never come with any objective things that we may give or take or do anything from it. That's what we can derive out of this conversation with Bhagavan. And therefore, the relative happiness is always temporary. One may experience the same event, a sense of happiness, whereas the other may not even experience that happiness. So a same event we know leaves one person very happy, at the same event may leave the other person unhappy. So therefore, any objective experience that we have is always relative. But when we get back to the absolute, our own natural truth, what we experience and what others experience in that is only through and through happiness, because we have tapped into that natural happiness, which is our own state. That's why Bhagavan says that the absolute happiness is the most important thing that we need to look for. And this natural, he goes on to say, it is a natural state where man is free from pain, from pleasure, and in peace. Now, the pain, the pleasure, the peace, all that we talk about is something that we recollect or we experience something objectively. But in the true sense, when we go to the real state of the self, we recognize that, like the sun, in whose presence all things happen, in a similar way, in the very being of oneself, all things are happening, whether subtle or gross, everywhere, and one is really not touched by any of this. That really is the state of one's own nature, and that is the real Achyuta, untouched state from everything. So when we recognize that, then we recognize that no event ever has disturbed the true state of the self, and no further events will ever disturb it either. So when we recognize that natural truth by itself, then the real sense of calm, the real sense of peace, the real sense of happiness is found to be abundantly present in one's own natural truth, which is totally, naturally unaffected by anything. Therefore, to get back to this natural state, to get back to this forgotten truth of ourself, Bhagavan has devised a mechanism called self-enquiry. And in that, whenever, due to habit, whenever our attention moves outward, because we have been long habituated to find happiness through objects. So whenever we see anything objective, whether it is a gross object or a subtle object like a thought, obviously the attention will go towards it, seeking for happiness. And we know that it is only a pleasure only if something comfortable comes out of that going away, going outward towards those thoughts. And if something uncomfortable happens, we will not be experiencing that pleasure also. Having recognized this, Bhagavan has given us to inquire then and there, to whom is this thought, or to whom is this thing that is appearing? The obvious answer will be, it is for me, not for somebody next to me. All of this objective experience is only happening to me, whether it is subtle or gross. Therefore, then the main important question is, who am I? And this is the most important question. We need not answer this question. We need to stay with the question to find, what do we really refer to as I within? What is that we call as I? Or where from this thought I rises within me? When we put this inquiry, when we conduct this inquiry, the grace of the Master takes us to our natural state of the self, that is the pure being consciousness. And by repeatedly diving back to that source, Bhagavan assures that even one thought, if we take it back to the source instead of pursuing it, we go a long way. And by repeatedly practicing this inquiry, the more and more the mind, as he says, gets attractive or gets incentivated to that natural peace. And eventually, Bhagavan says that the peace alone will remain and shine, because one recognizes that is the natural truth of oneself. And all that, the thoughts and everything that was rising in the mind was all an ignorant idea, an ignorant concept, of one being the body, but really one is that pure being consciousness. This will be recognized, and that natural state of the self wherein there is nothing but happiness, and happiness alone will be experienced unbroken. Until that, every time a thought rises, making us move away outwardly, Bhagavan says we should diligently inquire to whom is this, recognize it is for me, and then who am I, and use the inquiry to get back to our natural state. And with repeated practice, the peace alone remains, says Bhagavan. With abundant grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. For the next 20 minutes, no matter how many thoughts come, no matter whatever is the nature of those thoughts, good thought, bad thought, ugly, spiritual, it's all an objective to the attention. Therefore, we should question to whom is this, recognize that it is for me, and further inquire who am I, what do I refer to as I, or where from these thoughts are rising within me. And when we do so, we get back to the pure being consciousness, our own nature, with the grace of the Master. With repeated practice, this becomes easy to recognize our natural state, and also the natural state is found to be unaffected by any of the things that are happening on the surface. And with Bhagavan's immense grace, let's practice self-enquiry for the next 20 minutes. Om Namo Bhagavate Ramana. Thank you all. Over to Sarada Akka. Namo Ramana Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to the self shining as Ramana in all beings. Prostrations to Ramana shining as the self in all beings. We are meditating on the 18th chapter of Ramana Gita, and we had meditated on the first two verses, the second verse being Aruna Shaila Gatashramavasinam Paramahamsam Ananjanam Achyutam Karunaya Dadatam Vyavaharitam Satatam Atmani Samsthitam Akshare. Aruna Shaila Gatashramavasinam, one who lives in the ashrama of situated at Arunachala. So that is and he is immaculate, Ananjanam, Achyutam. And Achyutam means one who is immaculate, who has got no faults at all. Arunashaila Gatashrama Vasinam Parama Hamsam, the great Hamsa. And he is ever abiding in the self. Karunaya Dadatam Vyavaharitam Satatam Atmani Samsthitam Akshare. Akshare means without any decline in his state of self-abidance. He is always abiding in the self. Satatam Atmani Samsthitam. But what does he do? Out of compassion. Karunaya Dadatam Vyavaharitam. Because in Upadesha Saram and in Saddarshanam also, Bhagavan says, Aham kritim yo lasati grasitva kim tasya karyam parishishtam asti. What remains for such a one to do? If one is ever abiding, Aham kritim yo lasati grasitva, when the ego has gone and one is ever abiding in the self, tasya karyam kim parishishtam asti. What is there left for him to do? And similarly, in Upadesha Saram, Bhagavan asks, Krityamasti kim swasthitim yataha. Swasthitim yataha. Here he says, if one is abiding ever in the self, what is there to be done? There is no work left for him to do. There is nothing to achieve, no motive, nothing to be gained at all. So, why do we see Bhagavan active? Ganapati Muni is saying here, it is Karunaya, out of compassion. But what is this Karuna of Bhagavan? Is that Karuna a motive? Is compassion a motive for him? If there is no other motive, can compassion be a motive for Ramana? No, says Ganapati Muni in another composition of praise on Bhagavan, the Ramana Chatvarimshat. In that he says, Na karuna guna tava vidampate hridayate jasa sahaja bhaivate. Karuna is also not a motivation or a motive or a desire, unlike what it is for us. So, normally in the spiritual path, in the path of sadhana, in the Shastric traditional format, there are said to be six hurdles or Arishad Varga. In another format, we can say that it is Kama, Krodha, and strangely, Karuna becomes also a hurdle in one's path. So initially it is desire. It is desire which makes the thought move outwards towards an object. But supposing one has overcome one's desires through years of sadhana or through the intensity of the sadhana, it is possible that one may fall a prey to anger. Swami Shivananda, in a little skit which he has written, says that anger is a greater hurdle than even desire or kama. So there will be anger, righteousness, because one has followed the right path. So when one follows the right path, one becomes angry about something which is wrong. One becomes disturbed by the wrongdoing of someone or the other. So krodha may come. And when such krodha comes, Swami Shivananda says it is more dangerous because it feels that it is right. After all, I am justified in getting angry. The other person is making a mistake. So should I not get angry? Should I simply condone all errors? So the point is not that one should cease from discriminating between right and wrong. The point is not that one can accept everything as right, because when one is functioning in the world, there are areas of wrong and right. Of course, they are relative. Each dharma is a very difficult question because one cannot say the same thing is dharma for everyone at all times. So it's a difficult question. But Bhagavan gives us a very simple dharma. He gives us a very simple formula. We don't have to overcome kama specifically. We don't have to overcome krodha specifically. But we can overcome kama and krodha by the power of self-enquiry, by questioning for whom. But actually, it looks as if Bhagavan is not saying anything against the Rishad Vargas. He is not saying anything against Kama, Krodha and all that. It is not the case. Because when even a single thought is not to be encouraged, how can there be room for desire? How can there be room for anger? And how can there be room for concern about others? Which is actually karuna. When the mind becomes purer and more sattvic, we begin to have concern for others. We are not worried about ourselves. Maybe that becomes less and less. The desires for oneself become less. Anger also does not come because one is in equilibrium, but one may have concern for others. So long as there is another person, so long as there is duality, as long as there is division, there is danger. Because division is not the truth. There is no division in the self. It is advitiya. In that atma, in that satata atma nishtha, Bhagavan is abiding ever. How can he see another to have compassion towards the other? He does not see another. One of the devotees, Mercedes de Acosta, she came to him and she asked, Maharshi, you say there is only one consciousness. You mean to say that you, I, and my servant who is standing and waiting outside the hall, all of us are one and the same? And Bhagavan Ramana replied, all are one, you, the servant, I, and the monkeys which are playing outside the window. She was shocked. She said, how can the monkeys be the same as us? They belong to a totally different species. Then he said, there is no doubt that all are one in one consciousness. In one consciousness, there is no division. However, a jnani sees a man as a man and a woman as a woman. A jnani sees red as red and green as green. A Jnani sees the hill as the hill and Arunachala as the very, very special hill. Arunachala is seen by the Jnani. Then where is the difference? Bhagavan says in Ullad Narpade, Agnyasya Vignasya Ja Vishwamasti Purvasya Drishyam Jagadeva Satyam Parasya Drishyashraya Bhutamekam Satyam Prapurnam Pravibhatyamekam. In the eyes of a Jnani and an Ajnani, there is a world. But what is the difference then between them? For the Ajnani, the seen world is real. We have attraction and repulsion. We want something in that world, we don't want something in that world. We like something and we are upset by something. So there is the positive and the negative. Whereas, what does the Jnani do? He says, he is the Adhara, the one consciousness that shines in everything, or rather, everything shines in that consciousness. It is not consciousness shining in you and me and in that monkey. It is that the monkey, the servant, I and you are all included in that consciousness, says Bhagavan, when he had that experience of death and transcended it as a boy of 17. He says, I knew that I was the deathless spirit which transcended and included the body. So, the karuna of Bhagavan is not an ichha. It is not a desire. It is not a motive to help anybody. So, he will not, when we have a motive to help somebody, we are caught in dvandva. We are caught in duality. Therefore, even the motive of compassion, that's the best motive. That's the best desire in a way. Even that, we must inquire into, no matter what, the best thought. And sometimes if the worst thought also comes due to some vasana bala, that also, whatever the thought, we have to inquire into its source and take inspiration from the fact that Bhagavan is Satata Atmani Samsthitam Akshare. So when one abides in the self always, then everything happens naturally. What is this natural karuna? Muruganar Swami says it is like a tree. It is like a tree which gives shade to every comer by nature, not by choice. A tree does not choose, I will give shade to A because he is very, very thirsty. I need not give shade to B because he is not so thirsty. I can give 100 rupees to A because he is in need. I need not give it to another B because he is not in need. It does not make any such discrimination. It will give shade to whosoever will come and sit under its nice, spreading, beautiful branches and the leaves. So, that is how Bhagavan's karuna is. But Bhagavan also gives an explanation for the energy that works through a jnani. This explanation he gives in his explanations or answers to Shiva Prakasham Pillai is that of the sun. He says the sun engages in or does not engage, it results in so many activities and fruition of so many experiences. Because of the sun, what happens? All the living beings awake. When the sun rises, living beings awake. When it is totally dark, it is very difficult to be awake. I've heard that in countries where there is darkness for nearly 6 months, they are almost depressed. They work with nowadays, because of the modern science and its advancement, they will work with all the artificial lights. But when the sun comes, there is a real energy in us. That's why we have prayers to the sun in our culture. So the sun makes us all feel awake and vibrant, and we need that energy from the sun nowadays because they are not going out much. Everyone is said to have deficiency in vitamin D because not enough exposure to sunlight. So the sunlight is a source of great energy in all of us, and the sunlight is the cause of photosynthesis in the plant. The plant makes its own green and it makes its own food because of the sunlight and of course water and other things. But the sunlight is the most important element. And what else does the sun do? The sun creates the seasons for us because of the way the earth is tilted towards the sun. We have day and night, and we have the seasons, and we have water, drinking water because of the sunlight. Because the sunlight makes the water of the sea, which is not potable, which we cannot drink, which is saline. And it makes that water rise up. The water cycle is created. The sunlight makes the water evaporate and go up and become clouds and then again come down as rain. So the sunlight does all this. The sun, you may say, does all this. And the sun does not take any holiday. Doesn't say Sunday is not holiday for the sun. It may be holiday for us, isn't it? So the sun does not take off any time. So the sun is actually called a karma yogi because he will not stop even a moment. He is constantly at his job. But actually, what does the sun do? Does the sun do anything? The sun just remains as the sun, as light. And all these activities happen because the sun is light. So Bhagavan says that if we remain in our natural state, if we remain in the self as he remained, he says that what all has to get done through us will automatically get done through us. We don't have to make any effort to perform action. It will automatically happen. It is called automatic divine action. In fact, that is what happens all the time. Even now, it is only automatic divine action, but we don't realize it. Once we are in tune with the self and established there, we will understand that actions are happening of their own accord by the supreme will and the supreme energy. So that is the nature of Bhagavan's actions. And when we see him engaged out of pure, this is pure compassion because it is of the very self expressing itself. When we see him engaged in activities which have no sense of demarcation but are full of this pure compassion, the pure love of the self, then we too are drawn towards the self. We understand that there is no problem if we give up activities. There is no problem if we give up thoughts and abide in the self. Everything will happen automatically. In fact, now we are carrying our own burdens on our heads. At that time, we can lay down the burden comfortably on the train itself, which is carrying everything, us and our luggage. So that is the description which Muni gives in the first two verses of Ramana Gita, of Bhagavan, of the great Jivan Mukta, which draw us back to our own true nature. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukhavarirashi Yasyor Mimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami. Or I'm not.